Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
The atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand.
It is our basic human right to be fucked up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Veritatis. Hello, occultists, and welcome back to Occultae Veritatis podcast. My name is Leon Filger, along with
St. Mary,
Ood Gallifrey,
and joining us in studio,
Steph,
and
Taddy Love.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you.
I will begin this episode with a reading from the book Failure is Not an Option by Gene Kranz. Ood will provide the voice of astronauts in the Apollo 1 capsule as it sat on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center on the evening of January 27th, 1967. On page 196, Kranz writes, quote, "The launch team continued trying to work around the communications problems. Attempting to resolve the comm problems, Grissom and Ed White exchanged in their suit audio electrical connectors, while Roger Chaffee and the launch team rehearsed procedures for a dry check of the spacecraft thrusters."
Dry check your thrusters.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
At 5:20 p.m., the countdown entered the scheduled hold point at T-minus 10 minutes, where the spacecraft would switch to its internal power. The communications problems had to be fixed before proceeding. Kraft entered the hold in his console log, punched in his voice comm, and said, "Ground control, see if you can get a handle on the voice problems. The rest of you can take 10. At 5 hours, 31 minutes, and 4 seconds Houston time, a brief voice report jolted the launch and flight teams. It was perhaps the defining moment in our race to get to the moon. After this, nothing would be quite the same ever again."
Fire! We got a fire in the cockpit. We've got a bad fire. Get us out. We're burning up. Ah!
There would be no final agreement on who in the Apollo spacecraft shouted what. But even today, just reading their words on paper is chilling. That's depressing as fuck, so let's get drunk.
So, what's your poison?
Poison for tonight, because we're all, I don't know, I was 18. How?
Like
16.
Really?
Yeah, like 13?
I think
16.
I think 13 or 14.
Okay, past the solos. It's time for some Smirnoff Ice.
By the way, my grandparents got me started on a whiskey like at 6. So that's an old family tradition.
Cups.
Oh,
cool. Right.
Cups.
Okay.
I hope that intro wasn't too depressing.
Oh no.
We just started with death.
Just depressing enough.
Yeah.
I don't know if you are familiar with the episodes that I do, but...
Yeah, fact.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
I remember why I stopped drinking this.
Because it's sweet as
Holy fuck.
Oh,
wow.
You.
It's like drinking a candy cane.
It's like drinking a candy cane.
It's what blackouts taste like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it a myth that like more sugary stuff causes worse hangovers?
That's not a myth.
No, I think it's true.
That is a fact. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Oh, is it like a plastic?
Oh, yeah. I tell you. This, and to the occultists out there, thank you again for donating to the Patreon. Because of that, we were able to buy some awesome booze.
Awesome, in quotation
This is the premium $9.99 bottle.
And I think in honor of a capsule fire, we should start a capsule fire in the recording studio here. And I think Steph brought us some goodies.
I did. I bought this the other day. I don't usually smoke sativa, but I thought I would try it out. I think it's called Sweet Burmese.
Ooh, fun.
It's Canada. It's legal now.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
I find I forget about that quite often.
Yeah.
It's sad.
I'm still like super stealth when I go to my balcony, like looking both ways and shit. I'm like, really?
Making sure that no one else is out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I own my own house, so I can just go out and do it.
Yeah. Well, here the official apartment policy is no weed smoking allowed. But
oh no!
I live on the same floor as all the maintenance people and employees of this like apartment district, and every single one of those fuckers smokes weed. So good luck. Good luck.
Nice. Enforcing it.
It's going to be like your maintenance man and your secretary and your accountant are both huge stoners. So come on now. I don't know. I guess maybe 4 out of 10. Like I wouldn't want to get drunk off this stuff.
No, it would be it tastes like a hangover.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it 13 Vladimir Komarovs who died out of 17 Georgy Dobrovolsky, Viktor Patsieva, Valesia Volokov, who are also dead. Out of 7 Gregory Jarvis, Christy McCaffles, Ronald McNair, Ellison, blah, 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 and a few others who are also dead out of me.
Oh,
sweet.
Who is alive?
Can someone break that down?
Nope.
For me?
Once we hit a certain amount of patrons, we're going to do like a conversion chart.
Yeah,
excellent.
250 patrons conversion chart.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, Leon Filger conversion.
Yeah.
And there's only a 100-person Leon Filger gets fucking sprayed with mace level.
Yeah.
So like start subscribing, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What are we going to do to top that? I think I'm going to have to get my testicles removed, I think. In honor of the fans.
In honor of them.
I don't know what I'll do that's that's rather less comfortable than getting sprayed with mace. I will... Okay, the worst thing that could possibly happen to me, aside from being in a pit full of bears, is being in a pit full of crickets.
Oh, no.
No, you'll have to eat a whole avocado.
No.
You don't like avocado?
I can't hold it down. Like, what's the point of that? I'll gag on the first bite.
But you eat a cricket? Would you eat a cricket?
Would you eat a live cricket?
No, I wouldn't eat a live cricket.
Would you eat a dead cricket, like a dried cricket?
No.
Really? I used to snack on them.
I would eat like a cookie made of cricket flour if no one told me about it. But like, no, there's nothing worse. I will put my head in a tank of crickets. At 250 patrons.
Ugh.
Holy crap.
Ugh.
And dude,
I don't like that either.
I have to eat an entire bottle of Ativan before I do it, but I'll do it.
250 patrons, Leon will put his head inside of a... Let's do the 250. Let's do that. That's the face our fears level.
Okay.
Fuck.
Okay, so I'm probably gonna... I don't know. If I'm really feeling brave, maybe I can do that tarantula in the mouth trick.
Oh my god.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I would do it. It's just that you got to worry out for their guard hairs because they kind of like flick them at you, and they're like porcupine quills, very very tiny ones. They're very irritating. I know because I got some like in my mouth once. Yeah.
Wait. Can we circle back to how?
I had a girlfriend who had 23 tarantulas in her bedroom.
No, you.
Do I know this girlfriend?
Yes, and yeah, no. Yeah, no. I about a decade ago, I dated a girl who had a room full of tarantulas in different tanks.
Yeah,
and in one, and what?
Not all the Viagra in the world.
No, well, and what gave me the fear of crickets is that she had a tank on one of the lower shelves full of crickets because these spiders just eat crickets. Mm-hmm. And I was laying, and it was so hot in there. So hot in that room because there were heat lamps above all the fucking spiders. Mm. It was like sleeping in an oven. Like the bed was on the floor. I was completely naked and just drenched in sweat.
Wait, the bed is in the room with all the spiders?
This is her bedroom.
Yeah.
Oh, God, no. I thought it was a separate room, like a different room just for spiders.
No, man.
No.
Yeah, that's why I was saying not all the Viagra in the world.
No, I fucked in that room. It's
impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dick would forever be just a scared, limp mess in that room.
No, I fucked many times in the spider room. It was not a biggie for me. What was really horrid though is that next to the bed was the tank full of crickets, and in the middle of the night you could hear them bouncing off the roof of their little aquarium thinger.
Yeah, it's gross.
And one night I heard this crash, and the cricket terrarium had overturned.
How?
And there were, I don't know, maybe a monster, and the cricket terrarium overturned.
But how? How could it have possibly overturned?
I don't know, like a monster cricket bounced off the lid, but it overturned, and my naked body was covered in crickets.
Oh, no, thank you.
And after the crickets were dealt with, I still got laid, which is I mean, props to me, but goddamn.
Like, that sounds like a way to build a fetish.
I can't do crickets.
That is a girl who is not phased.
Nope.
She has seen some things.
She also had some giant millipedes in another tank, and like she bred baby tarantulas for the pet stores.
Cool.
Yeah. I thought it was cool at the time until the cricket attack.
Yeah. We used to have a bunch of snakes when we lived in Vancouver. I don't know.
Do they eat crickets?
Yeah. Well, they mice.
Yuck.
So we'd have to, like, we bought frozen thawed rats. So they were just like frozen rats. And you thawed them out and got them warm.
And I used to volunteer at the zoo when I was a kid. And one of my jobs was microwaving mice and feeding them to the owls.
Oh, no.
And then going into the enclosure and picking up the little owl pellets.
Yeah.
And then you get to dissect them and see all the little like bones from the mice inside them.
Oh, man, I remember doing that. We did that in like grade 3 or something. That was super cool.
Yeah, and
I
we used to
remember
like
that too.
box them up and send them to schools. And it was like my job to like pick up the pallets, wash them off to get rid of like any slime or whatever, and then put them in little Ziploc bags and send to schools so kids could dissect them.
Well, thank you for your service.
Yeah, you're welcome. I loved it. It was a good summer gig.
Yeah, the owls are really efficient with what they eat.
Oh yeah, they sure are.
Apollo astronauts Roger Chaffee, Edward White, and Gus Grissom lose their lives in a tragic flash fire aboard their grounded space capsule. The tragedy occurred during a simulated countdown for the first flight of the Apollo program, whose goal is to put a man on the moon by 1970. Grissom and White were veterans of spaceflight. Chaffee, a rookie. During a drill similar to this, the entire 3-man crew was engulfed by flames. A blue ribbon panel of space experts is investigating, aided by impounded NASA films and tape recordings. Grissom was one of the 7 original astronauts. White was America's first spacewalker. Chaffee, never in space, had long experience as a jet test pilot. He was proud and happy that his first flight was to initiate the Apollo program. When the tragedy struck, one of the astronauts shouted, "Fire in the spacecraft!" In a few seconds, all 3 were victims of the swift inferno which left the capsule a blackened shell. One reporter said it looked like the inside of a furnace. Investigators theorize that perhaps a short circuit or electrical overload may have sparked the blaze. 27 would-be rescuers were all overcome by smoke and heat. Apollo astronauts Chaffee, White, and Grissom, martyred heroes who gave their lives in total dedication to duty. Their memory will forever be honored.
You did a really good job of the dying astronauts.
Yeah?
That's pretty good.
I wasn't sure whether to go with I was trying to go with like panicked but in control kind of thing.
Yeah, I think like there is audio. That script is in audio. It's available on the internet, and I've listened to it. And I considered before listening to it, including it in the show. And upon listening to it, I decided definitely not to include it in the show. It's out there on the internet if you want to find it for yourselves, but it's pretty gruesome.
It must be terrifying because even if you hurt yourself in a city, you have emergency services. But if you're up in a capsule, there's nobody.
No, and there were like 27 people up there that tried to drag them out, but there were explosions that kept going off that was just like pushing them back every time they tried to get in. And the problem with the Apollo 1 fire, one of the problems, is that the hatch to get into the capsule was 3 layers thick.
Holy shit.
There was the inner layer, which was like sort of the heavy bulkhead door that in the vacuum of space would seal it shut so that you couldn't actually jump out. And when they did EVAs outside the capsules and later Apollo missions...
What's an EVA?
Extravehicular activity, or spacewalk.
I can feel the sativa kicking in already.
Later on in the Apollo missions, after they took photos on the surface of the moon, while they were on their way back to Earth, one of the astronauts had to climb out of the command module, scoot down the side of the service module to the lunar module, pull the film out of a receptacle there, and then drag it back into the capsule to return it from Earth, because there was no easier way to get camera film off the lander back into the command and service module.
Oh boy.
I was talking about the problem with Apollo 1 and why the subsequent Apollo command and service modules were very, very different than the first one. Because in the Apollo 1 fire, like I had said, the capsule had 3-layered door. So the inner layer was sort of like the bulkhead door that in the vacuum of space would seal itself shut.
Well, bulkhead your door.
Okay, very good. Very good. The second door was an outer door that opened outward. that could be opened from the inside, but only after the inner door was pulled out of the way. And then in the case of Apollo 1, because it was still on the launch pad, there's an aero shell cover over top of the command module that stays in place while it breaks through the atmosphere so that shit doesn't get like knocked off and dinged and whatnot. And then once it gets past the point of maximum aerodynamic drag, also known as max Q, the escape rockets fire and rip the aero shell off the command module, and it goes fucking off into the atmosphere, and the rest of it goes to the moon.
Cool.
Woohoo. But in the case of Apollo 1, what happened, and they didn't do it afterward, previously they had been filling their capsules with 100% oxygen.
Oh, no.
Because it's a lot cheaper to spend a tank of oxygen versus a tank of air. Right? So the more oxygen you can bring, the cheaper, the better, because oxygen weighs a lot, air weighs a lot, and if you can carry oxygen instead of air, you're going to get more bang for your buck. So up to that point, they were using 100% oxygen environments. And in the case of Apollo 1, they never really did quite figure out exactly where the fault was, but there was a loose wire and there was a spark. And in a 100% oxygen environment, the Apollo 1 capsule turned into a crematorium.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until later that day that they were finally able to pry the hatch open because the thing was so hot. And when they looked inside, there was nothing. It was just ash. Like the astronauts had been cremated, quite literally.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem was like the materials inside weren't really built to be fire resistant or fireproof.
No, because they never considered that there would be a fire because there'd never been one.
Yeah.
But anyway, after that, they no longer did 100% oxygen. I should mention, too, that not only did they have a 100% oxygen environment, but that the pressure in the cabin exceeded sea level pressure.
Oh, boy.
So they really had it like pumped full of explosives, essentially.
Yeah. And that means that the fire plasma can be readily fed by that air pressure.
Yeah. And
shoving itself in.
And even after like complete combustion of most of the inside of the capsule, there's still enough oxygen left in there to literally burn everything.
Wow.
So their cremation was complete, but yeah, it was pretty dicey. There were a rash of suicides shortly after among the technicians who were on the launch pad who tried to pull them out. One was later that day.
Can you fucking imagine? I just keep thinking about like what goes through your head and how long do you have?
Well, listening
like how long
in the command room even.
Like you know, it starts and how long do you have between it starting and you being dead? Like how much time do you have to think like, holy fuck, I'm about to burn alive?
Well, you heard Ood's monologue. There was 12 seconds elapsed from the beginning to the end.
When it happened, they were just waiting for the test to resume. They wouldn't have seen the spark that started the fire because it was behind a panel door down below Gus's feet. Because of the oxygen, the spark was able to jump out to the nylon netting under the seats. Gus probably saw it first because it was closest to him.
Fire! We got a fire in the cockpit!
The procedure would have had Gus push down Ed's headrest so that Ed could start turning the latch on.
We got a bad fire!
By now, the temperature and pressure were astronomical.
From the first, there's a fire to the end scream, 12 seconds is what it took them
I guess
to die.
it was quick then, I guess.
Well,
I don't know.
It was particularly horrible because the fellow in the center, Gus Grissom, who was the command module commander, was found with his hands up above his head, reaching for the hatch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And the reason that it may cut off there is because I believe that Apollo had a push-to-talk system.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so he was holding that as long as he could.
Yeah.
And then he just couldn't hold that button anymore.
It may have been on Vox.
Oh, yeah.
Considering the time it was. Usually during launches, they had it on Vox.
Yeah.
Anyway, but at any rate, it was 12 seconds and he tried to open the hatch. And they had done timings later on to figure out how quickly an astronaut could get out. And it was like more than 2 minutes it took them to get out of the capsule. So there was zero chance. And after that, they took a year off and completely redesigned it and have a new one-piece door that opens to the outside.
That's likely for the best.
Yeah. Likely for the best. And there's like, you need only one arm to operate it. You need your wrist and pop a thing with your elbow and the hatch will pop open.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's why you want to have the best engineers on the job.
That's why the fucking Avro Arrow was canceled, and all the Avro Arrow technicians and scientists went to the United States and put a man on the moon.
Yeah. Ugh. Oh, by the way, update on that. I believe that was case 7. They dredged the Avro Arrow up from the lake.
Yeah, they fucking found it.
Yeah,
they found it.
Insert clip here.
What we think we have here is a Delta track vehicle, part of the developmental program used as a precursor to the Avro Arrow 1/8 scale models that were launched from Point Peter. It was found on the bottom of Lake Ontario, far off of Point Petrie. It's been sitting on the bottom of the lake for some 60 years. This is the first time we've had tangible evidence of something from this test program. We've never seen an object before or the equipment inside it because nobody's got one in their collections. So it's very precious. It's the first of its kind on land. The object in front of us was developed before the Avro Arrow program developed an actual plane that could fly. So it was a precursor to the planes being built. There were many kinds of test models, from tiny ones launched in wind tunnels to larger ones like this that were fired off of booster rockets or other forms of ballistic guns. They had to determine the behavioral properties of the wing shapes, the body shapes, in terms of developing something that would be efficient in terms of aerodynamic behavior and speed, because they were trying to achieve a maximum speed. For the Arrow program, that was over Mach 2, 2 times the speed of sound. There were 6 planes built, 6 or more, and others, various states of construction. 5 of them actually flew. And then all of those, along with the 6th and the other ones, were all ordered destroyed when the program was shut down. So really, we don't have any large tangible pieces other than a few that are maintained in some museum collections, such as here at Ingenium. But we don't have any from the early developmental stages. The Arrow itself was a supersonic fighter. The earlier planes that did fly flew at least as high as Mach 1.8. The Mk3 version was supposed to fly, I believe, up to Mach 2.4. We never got to see it fly those speeds because the Arenda engines never got put on the Arrows itself, and the planes were destroyed and the program was shut down before it ever had a chance to prove itself above Mach 2. So that was the end of the program, and all we have left are archival records and a few pieces in a few collections. Now we have this one that's a definite lead up to the whole program, the first of the Delta wings that we've seen come out of Lake Ontario, and we're very proud to have it here.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah.
Since it's your episode.
No, I appreciate that very much. Yeah. That's infuriating. Canadians put American men on the moon, if y'all didn't know that. Anyway, so this is an episode on space disasters. It's going to be one of those like kind of cutesy episodes I do because I have a final to write on Monday morning, as does Steph. Same final.
Oh my God! Don't remind me.
Yeah. So this will be a bit of a quickie, and here we go. So I'm going to go through sort of a chronology of space disasters. I'm going to start with the really juicy ones. That is the ones in which the astronauts and or cosmonauts died. Nice. So yeah. So there are sort of 2 classifications of space disasters I'll use. One above the Kármán line and one below the Kármán line. And the Kármán line is 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, where it's generally accepted by scientists that space begins and the atmosphere ends. Now, there are huge variations of it. NOAA doesn't use the Kármán line. NASA does. There are all sorts of different folks that use different definitions for space, but for all intents and purposes, the Kármán line is 100 kilometers up, and that's what I'm using. So the very first fatality in space above the Kármán line was a parachute failure that killed a man named Vladimir Komarov. So he was on a one-day mission on the very first set of like the old dirty Vostok capsules that like predated Sputnik. They're like super old, But they were the workhorse of the Soviet Union, and they launched a hell of a lot more stuff more quickly than the Mercury and Gemini modules.
Oh yeah, they were big, they were ugly, and they fucking worked.
And they worked on benzene, which is a little side note on benzene. Most rockets these days run on solid propellants or a combination of hydrogen and oxygen. Why hydrogen and oxygen? Because the byproduct of hydrogen and oxygen combining is heat and water. So it's a very safe sort of thing to leave after one. Benzene reacts in combination with another chemical so that you don't need fire or a spark. The mere combination of the two chemicals caused them to explode. And that's how the Soviets fired their first rockets, with these controlled chemical explosions.
So metal.
Now,
Yeah.
why it's a bad thing is because benzene and its byproducts are incredibly toxic, like will eat your fucking skin. And so there were like poor farmers all across the Soviet Union who were getting these Vostok boosters dropping into their yards, and they were dying from benzene poisoning.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
And the Russian government, back in the day, there was no such thing as lawsuits or anything. So they just, oh, sorry, fuck rocket fell on you. That's just how she goes.
Yeah.
Shitty luck.
Yeah. So they give you a couple bucks and mind your sheep. And
Yeah.
that's the end of that.
Pretty much. It's like, do you have any friends at the consulate? No. Fuck off.
Yeah. Anyway, so Vladimir Komarov, his parachute didn't open at all after he re-entered.
Oh no.
So while he technically died on impact with the ground, I've counted him in the Carman line group because he was fucked from the beginning.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, and like he was killed when the capsule hit the ground at very high speed. The thing made a crater and he was in with it.
Just went splat.
Goop.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a fun fact coming up that I already programmed into the OV pod thing that's related to that. When somebody hits the ground, like from skydiving and dies, it's usually because the brain hits the front of the skull and usually splits into about 4 different parts from the impact.
Cool.
Yeah.
Like a melon.
Yeah. I guess there was this meta study with a bunch of who's the people that take apart dead people to see how they died?
Coroners?
Yes, coroners. There was a coroner metadata study, and I guess when the brain hits the front of the skull at that speed, it usually splits into 4 different parts. So yeah.
That's a neat fact to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. So the second fatality in space, it was a true fatality in space. It was the crew of Soyuz 11, Gregory Dobrovolsky and Viktor Patsiev and Vladimir Volkov. They died quite famously after undocking from the Salyut 1 space station. And we talked about Salyut 1 back when we were talking about the Apollo-Soyuz test project. So go back and fucking listen to that episode. It's a really good one.
I believe that's case 2.
Yeah, it is case 2.
Yeah, it was like
yeah.
a long time.
Way back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they undocked from the Salyut 1 space station, and they usually do this thing where they undock, they talk to the ground, they get ready for re-entry, and away they go. And they communicated with ground control after they undocked. And then it looked like there was a normal reentry, but they didn't communicate with the ground on their way down like they should have as soon as they come out of the radio silence through the reentry where you have a radio blackout. They didn't communicate again after that. And their capsule landed perfectly under a parachute, came flop down nice and cute in the countryside. And the ground crew went to go harvest these guys out of the capsule. And they did this thing by tradition where one of them on the outside would bang on the hull of the spacecraft with a hammer, and the cosmonauts inside would bang back with their own hammer. And on the 30th of June, 1971, the crew did not bang back. And they cracked it open, and it turned out that a faulty valve had not closed during reentry, and they had decompressed during reentry. And so they were found basically with their blood boiled and their eyeballs popped out of their heads.
Well, God.
So no fire, but the air just got superheated.
Right. Well, I mean, it wasn't so much the superheated air inside. It's just the decompression in space. And the problem was it wasn't like a door blew and they decompressed right away. It was a slow leak from a valve. So they suffered real good and hard before they died.
Yeah. Like what I used to do as a kid, because I was an anxious kid, and I used to hold my breath and like squeeze my face really hard until like my face got red. And like I would always feel my eyeballs pressing against my skull and all that. And I imagine that was just the beginning for them. And they just went past that.
Yep.
Yuck.
Yeah, it would have really fucking sucked. The next one that really fucking sucked, on the 28th of January, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger took off from the Kennedy Space Center. 73 seconds and 15 kilometers or 49,000 feet later, the space shuttle broke apart, disintegrated, and fell back into the ocean in little pieces.
Control at T-minus 2 hours, 28 minutes and counting. Here comes the 51L flight crew boarding the elevator for the second time in 2 days, ready to depart the O&C building for the launch pad. Commander Dick Scobie, followed by Mission Specialist Julie Resnick, Ron McNair, Pilot Mike Smith, followed by Krista McAuliffe, teacher in space. Big smiles today.
T-minus 7 minutes, 30 seconds. And the ground launch sequencer has started retracting the orbiter crew access arm.
Krista is scheduled to perform lots of lessons from space, 2 of them actually, on her 4th day of the mission. That's going to be Friday if Challenger gets off the ground today, and it's looking good.
T-minus 2 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Retraction has started of the gaseous oxygen vent hood.
Less than a minute and a half, Concord's Krista McAuliffe is heading for the stars. You can feel the excitement here at Kennedy Space Center right now, and in less than a minute we'll be able to feel the Challenger taking off.
The SRB hydraulic power units have started. T-minus 15 seconds.
This is it, Krista McAuliffe about to make history.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Liftoff confirmed. Liftoff.
Houston, Challenger, roll program.
Roger, roll, Challenger. I'm speechless. Simply speechless. No other way to explain it. Simply awesome. The feeling, the whole grandstand, 3.5 miles away from here, just shakes, and it almost knocks you out of your seat. It leaves a trail of clouds, folks. It must be miles apart and miles wide, and I don't know how else you'd explain it. I was afraid this was going to happen, that this thing would be so awe-inspiring that I wouldn't know what to say, and that's occurred.
Good roll, flight.
Roger, good roll.
3 at 65.
65, Fido.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines.
She's up. Krista McAuliffe, heading to outer space. The first teacher in space, the first private citizen in space. It looks to be a perfect liftoff.
TDL confirms throttle. Thank you.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
Velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9.
Something went wrong here. We've got a problem with what looks like a second plume of smoke.
We do have a problem, Bob. It looks as if it may have lost a solid rocket booster. It's hard to tell.
There are 2 separate plumes of smoke, and the shuttle, we can't tell which one the shuttle is now. They've separated.
Fido trajectory. Go ahead.
Flight GC, we've had negative contact, lost downlink.
Okay, all operators, watch your data carefully. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
what had happened is basically the space shuttle program sucked. The space shuttle program has always sucked. It didn't do what it set out to do, which was come up with a cheap, reusable spacecraft that could get people into space easily. The launches were incredibly expensive. A total of 14 astronauts were killed in the space shuttle program, making it the most dangerous spacecraft ever created by human beings.
Oh my God.
Statistically, including Russia.
Yeah. And Russia gave way less of a fuck about human life.
Way less of a fuck. Anyway, so what happened is it had been really cold that morning, what with being January, even in Florida, and there was an O-ring that separated the external tank from the main engines of the space shuttle, and it cracked because it was cold. And on the way up, some hydrogen fuel leaked out of that faulty O-ring past the body of the shuttle, and the fire started and burned back into the external tank, which is a massive fucking hydrogen bomb. Like, that thing is so huge. I cannot impress upon you how large that tank of fuel is, and it exploded all in one go.
Oh no.
Now, they were doing Mach 1.8 at the time, so as soon as the spacecraft broke apart, it broke into even smaller pieces just in the slipstream. Fucky thing is that the astronauts at the time weren't wearing pressure suits. We didn't do that yet because the space shuttle is nice and safe, and so they basically rode up to space in their pajamas. So we didn't do reentry suits, but beside their chairs, the two pilots had their little pull handle, which would activate the emergency system, allowing them to get out. After the spacecraft exploded, they found the crew section underwater and found that both the pilots had pulled their handle.
Oh no.
That means they were alive on their way down to the ocean.
God. Oh.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, and they said it takes about 3 seconds to pull that handle. So from the time of the explosion, they had a full 3 seconds that they were alive and knew they were fucked.
And probably a lot longer.
Quite a bit longer. I mean, it's very likely that they died on impact with the ocean. If they had been wearing pressure suits at the time, they still would have been fucked. And I guess would have been fucked longer, but it was after that we started wearing pressure suits into space.
Yeah. And I think part of what makes like that program suck, like Leon said, is there was people ringing alarm bells beforehand. I believe there was a hearing where an engineer took an O-ring that was the same material as the stuff that's on there, and he put it in a really cold drink. And he showed right in the courtroom that, see, they get really brittle when they get cold, so we have to fix this or else it's going to leak.
Before the event, from information that was available and understanding that was available, was it fully appreciated everywhere that this seal would become unsatisfactory at some temperature, and was there some sort of a suggestion of a temperature at which the SRB, I guess you call it,
yes,
shouldn't be run?
Yes, sir. There was a suggestion of that. To answer the first question, given the configuration that we were in, that the seal would function at that temperature. That was the final judgment.
But Commission member Richard Feynman, after examining the O-ring, had a surprise.
Oh, I took this stuff that I got out of your seal, and I put it in ice water. And I discovered that when you put some pressure on it for a while and then undo it, it maintains, it doesn't stretch back, it stays the same dimension. In other words, for a few seconds at least, and more seconds than that, there's no resilience in this particular material when it's at a temperature of 32 degrees. I believe that has some significance for our problem.
No, and there were a lot of warnings about the space shuttle program at the time, but it was so far delayed and so far over budget, and the American people were not so much in favor of it, so it was going to get its government funding pulled. So they really threw it into space way before it was ready to go into space.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's bold.
There was one launch that was, when you start a launch, there's two phases. One is you start the main engines, and that's reversible. At any point, you can turn off those engines and decide not to go to space. But they're the external solid rocket boosters, which lift the external tank. Once those are lit, you can't unlight them. And the only possibility to really get rid of them is to try to blow them off while you're on your way up. But you can't do that on the pad. So there's a window of a few seconds between those engines starting and you getting into space where you're completely fucked. And there was, subsequent to this disaster, one space shuttle flight where they had 1/9 of a second between the SRB's lighting and them deciding to stay on Earth, during which time a catastrophic malfunction would have occurred. So the computer said abort 1/9 of a second before it would have been fatal.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
So there was an investigation into that, and it's like, oh yeah, it turns out we just ignored a whole bunch of safety shit that we probably should have put in place.
Whoops.
And it was like this space shuttle was like Apollo 1 over and over and over again, except in Apollo 1 they fixed it so it wouldn't happen again. And by fixed it, I mean they redesigned the system, but with the space shuttle they just did the same thing over again and fixed whatever the problem was for now.
I find the space race so interesting for that reason, because like science and engineering in its purest form is just logical math, and you just progress and find things out and like find out other things are faulty and all that. But like the space race, it went a little bit beyond science and to just like a dick measuring contest with Russia.
Yeah.
And people died because of it because things weren't ready.
Yeah. And speaking of things not being ready, on the 1st of February, what are you doing, Sage?
I'm trying to cut this.
Why?
It's not cutting.
It's not cutting?
Wire cutters do not cut paper.
No. On the 1st of February 2003, the space shuttle Columbia disintegrated while returning to Earth. What had happened to it is during launch, a little chunk of ice had fallen off the external tank and knocked off one of the thermal tiles on the underside of the space shuttle, which meant nothing as it was taking off. It was a problem that no one really saw in the video. It wasn't an issue. But then when it was re-entering at 32 kilometers above the Earth, it disintegrated. The heat from re-entry got into that hole that was left by the thermal tile inside the left wing, and the spacecraft was ripped to pieces.
I forget who it was, but I heard a YouTuber describing what it would be like, and he was like, imagine you're in a fantasy world and you're facing off against a dragon, and you have a cape you can hold in front of you that blocks the dragon's fire. And you rush towards the dragon feeling like confident, and turns out there's a little hole in the center of that cape and all the fire leaks through and burns you.
And that's exactly how it works.
Yeah.
On the 1st of February 2003, Columbia began its descent back to Earth. As the shuttle raced over the Pacific towards the US, the crew put on their suits, preparing themselves for a routine landing. It was now 8:40 a.m. At 8:44 a.m., Columbia re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Still, everything appeared normal.
By GNC.
Everything looked good to you? Control and rates and everything is nominal, right?
Control's been stable. We have good trims. I don't see anything out of the ordinary.
Okay.
It's noisy in there, but...
Then, just 22 minutes before touchdown, at 8:54 in the morning, there was an unusual reading from one of the shuttle's many sensors.
Flight back.
Go ahead, Max.
FYI, I've just lost 4 separate temperature transducers on the left side of the vehicle, hydraulic return temperatures.
4 high return temps?
To the left outboard and left inboard elevons.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy
Is it
your last.
instrumentation, Max?
Flight Max, those are also off.
Columbia, Houston, comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check.
I've got a couple of training deaths that aren't in space, but they really fucking sucked. On the 23rd of March, 1961, Valentin Boroyenko had the first space-related fatality. So during a 15-day endurance experiment at a low-altitude pressure chamber with only 50% oxygen, the astronaut trainee was dropped an alcohol-soaked cloth onto an electric hot plate. He suffered third-degree burns and died.
Wait, what? Whoa.
He was in a pressure tank just testing out how space would be like, and he lit a fire in the kitchen.
Jesus.
Oh shit, I left the oven on, and he died.
Good Lord.
Holy fuck. There's so much more burning deaths than I expected. Like there's less crashing, like impact deaths, and way more burning.
Yeah, it's actually the astronauts are most likely to die while flying fighter aircraft in between their space shuttle missions.
Oh, really?
Because, yeah, NASA employs jet training aircraft to get their astronauts here and there because it's a lot cheaper than flying them commercial or on a military flight. Yeah. And they're all highly trained pilots anyway, and they get flying hours that help them out in space. So anytime they're zipping around the place, they're always just using military jets with the NASA logo on the back of them.
Fuck, that's cool.
And it turns out they crash a lot because while they are usually because they're test pilots, and they get gutsy, right?
Oh yeah.
Like they fly the T-38 jet trainer, which is not a terribly advanced aircraft, but you can do some really fun stunts in it if you think you know what you're doing. And there have been cases of them like crashing into hangars and rolling into the ground. So yeah, astronauts are more likely to die while flying than while space flying.
Okay, how much do they make? Do they make like a good living? I mean, you're basically risking your life on a regular basis, it seems like.
No,
they don't. Oh.
No, they don't make a very good living at all.
Well,
because you don't want people getting into it for the money.
Yeah, actually.
So you just risk. You just risk your life because you love the craft.
Yes.
Wow.
That's why.
Shit, I've never loved anything that much.
Yeah,
I guess.
like no Canadian, like Chris Hadfield at his like highest earning never broke $100,000.
Seriously?
Nope.
Less than $100,000 to
when
be
he
an
was
astronaut?
commanding the International Space Station, he was making less than $100,000.
Whoa! Did not see that coming. Thought it was going to be a little more than that.
You want to hear something else? Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. How much do you think he made being the first man on the moon?
Well, obviously not a lot. Hadfield.
He made $33 above his base military pay as a bonus. He got a bonus of $33 for flying to the fucking moon.
That's 250,000 miles.
How does this happen?
Fucking capitalism.
I just don't get it.
Like here, buy yourself a meal at a mid-priced restaurant.
You got to
Red
go
Lobster. There you go.
You got to go to the moon and come back. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
Take your $33 and get out, Neil.
Bragging rights, right?
Soviet cosmonauts tend to die in drowning deaths during training.
Oh, that's better.
American astronauts tend to die in crashes.
I mean, whatever floats your boat, I suppose.
Whichever floats your boat,
Or
yeah.
sinks it.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm going to go through real quick some anomalies that happen during launches, and then we'll rocky road out of here. Mercury 4, after there was a splashdown, the hatch allegedly blew prematurely. Gus Grissom was flying in there, and the capsule sank to the bottom of the ocean.
God.
And he was accused of having blown the explosive bolts early, although a later investigation showed that he didn't, that it was just a spontaneous failure. But he didn't get to go meet President Kennedy because NASA thought he had fucked up.
Oh no.
Yeah, he was the only astronaut from the original 7 who didn't get to go see John Kennedy.
I'd be pretty bitter about that.
Yeah, I'd be bitter too.
You know what? Even better, I think maybe he has the blessing of Valhalla.
Maybe.
Yeah.
On the 14th of November, 1969, Apollo 12 was struck by lightning twice after it left the pad.
Oh, God.
Fucked up the electronics both times. Fucked up the first set of electronics the first time. Fucked up the backup electronics the second time. And thank God they had a third set of electronics so they'd have been fucked.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And up until then, a spacecraft had never been hit by lightning. And it was a completely bluebird sky. So it was like a bolt out of the blue.
Yeah. And these days, aircraft has like grounding, like wiring on the outside of the craft to like prevent much damage. But back then, no.
Yeah. And I mean, once it's in the air, there's only so much you can do about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip over Apollo 13. The reason for that is there will be an Apollo 13 episode upcoming.
Beauty.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
I've got an expert coming.
Yeah. By the way, if you want to tackle that one together and make it just a mega fucking episode, I'm good with that.
I'm not in with for that one. I love learning about space, but I wouldn't do an episode on it.
Yeah. The moon landing like gives me like a quarter chub. Like
Ooh.
just thinking about it. Like the blood happens.
Yeah. The last two disasters I'm going to talk about both happened on the clusterfuck that is the space station Mir.
Yes, Mir.
The first one on the 23rd of February 1997, someone left the fucking oven on. What? Literally, someone left the oven on. There was a fire on board the space station when a lithium perchlorate canister used to generate oxygen leaked. Fire was extinguished after about 90 seconds. The smoke did not clear for several minutes, and the entire space station was kind of doomed after that because it was filthy inside.
Oh no.
Then on the 25th of June, 1997 was a really bad year for Mir. After a Progress resupply ship, which just looks just like a Soyuz, but doesn't have any people inside it, and is autonomously flown. So there's a computer on board that zips it around and helps it dock with other spacecraft,
And
like Mir.
refresh my memory. What was Soyuz shaped like?
Soyuz is a 3-chunk module. The top is a sort of ball. That's their habitation module. The middle bit is a sort of a bell. That's the reentry module. And the bottom is a can. And that's where they store shit.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Progress is just like that. There just aren't any people in it.
Okay.
But on this particular day, the computer fucked up and Progress slammed into one of the modules on Mir. They were able to shut all the doors on either sides of it, and so no one died. But there was one poor cosmonaut whose entire life's work was in that module. All his clothing, all his science, everything was in there, and it had to be sealed off. And he was stuck on Mir for another 3 months with no fucking toothbrush.
Oh no! Like, that's the scary thing. Like, imagine what discoveries were lost.
Oh, I know. And I mean, imagine being so demoralized. First of all, you're on Mir, which sucks.
Yeah.
Fuck, like, oh. I mean, it's the worst space station to possibly be stuck on.
It's like a trashy apartment in space.
It is the trash apartment of space, yeah.
I'm going to post some pictures on the social media if you don't believe me. It's going to look like the bad apartment.
I think it's like the shitty inside of an earthworm. Like if you cut it open and all the shit fell out, that would be the inside of Mir.
Oh no.
Don't tell the Russians I said that, but I'm sure they know it.
I mean, I'm sure they're proud because they're like, yeah, it works. What?
And it did work, yeah.
It worked, for years.
It's just like Mir was problematic because the ventilation was so shitty after the fire. So much so that they had to do buddy checks on each other while they were sleeping because a cosmonaut would be chilling out, and because there was so little airflow, a bubble of carbon dioxide would form in front of his face, and his buddy had to come along and blow the CO2 off him periodically so he didn't die in his sleep.
Oh no.
That's what friends are for.
Yeah, that is what friends are. Blow my CO2, man. Oh, you got it.
That's what you do for a friend.
Yeah.
Man. And that you would barely notice.
Yeah, you'd think you'd barely notice, but...
What would that be like? You're still breathing in and out, but you're dying.
Well, here's the thing. And Steph knows this because we just fucking learned this.
Did I learn it, or was I playing Tetris?
A lack of... well, you were maybe both. You were definitely playing Tetris because I sit fucking behind you and you're always playing Tetris. No, a lack of oxygen does not startle the reflex to breathe. It's an abundance of carbon dioxide that startles the instinct to breathe. Yeah.
I did learn this.
Yeah.
I do remember this. Yes.
Nice.
Which is why one has to be careful when they're hyperventilating and dying at the same time, because when you hyperventilate, you put too much oxygen into your blood, which displaces the carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is what forces you to take that breath, which is why, and our professor was explaining this case to us, folks who swim to the bottom of swimming pools and try to do those hold your breath the longest competitions are in particular danger, because before they go underwater, they right, hyperventilate to get their body hyperoxygenated so they can hold their breath longer. But when they get to the bottom of the pool, there's not enough carbon dioxide in their system to tell them to breathe, and so they just fucking die at the bottom of the pool.
Oh god.
Yikes.
Yeah.
See, that's so counterintuitive.
That sounds horrendous.
Right?
It is, yeah.
There's so much that I love learning stuff like that. There's so much stuff like in health and science that's just counterintuitive, that doesn't work the way you think it should, and but it does. It's cool.
That's probably the only interesting thing I got out of Anatomy and Physiology 162.
I do remember that. I'm super excited that I was listening enough.
I hope that's on the fucking test.
With any luck.
Really, really hope.
Yeah, I'm sure if I'm sure Leon will show his rage or cheer on Twitter whether he passed or not.
Yeah. Okie doke. That's all I got, guys. For Occultae Veritatis podcast, Leon Filger.
Sage Murray.
Ooh, Gallifrey.
And in studio with us,
Steph.
And
Taddy Love.
Good night.
Love you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Au revoir.
This week we have a very special palate cleanser from our very own Nicoletta Wylde. And by very own, I mean one of our patrons, one of our 69 wonderful patrons. And this is her spoken word poem, Burn the Witch, from the album Dichotomy. Check out her stuff. Look up her name. Her name is spelled Nicoletta. Enjoy. and see you in the after show.
They tie me to the stake in the gaze of the blood moon. Fire! All around, all my world right now, this little meter by meter square, I can see it's a tight world embrace, kissing me from every side. It's a hot and heavy kiss down my throat in the form of ash, great fingertips of fuck fire carving my skin from my bones, untangling my blood system from the cheeky young muscles, picking off my limbs, one by one, the burning wood its mistress, rescoring my body as it formed in the womb so many years ago, begging the Lord my soul to take. It's aching. They tie me to the stake in the light of the blood moon, but he's wearing a disguise. They tie me to the stake in the light of the blood moon, and I know he's here because I can see him walking between the people. That way that he does, flickering in and out of the crowd as they spit and scream and throw their rotten food in my direction. Throw the offal they'd not feed their pigs, throw their broken weapons, their firewood, their tinder, and this rages the fire faster than when it tore the rags that are left of my clothes down into its smoky grip. The blood moon, that's the other reason. I know he's there. I can feel him staring at me. Cold, like I always get down my spine in his presence. Warm, like he's there beside me, and this ache that I can never quite place, that I decide in that moment is the strain of my world multiplied by 2. Loneliness, +1. A bedsit with 2 people, a room, one single fucking room, plus a cat and 2 kids. This strain, but ever so slightly, some cottage thatch for 2, holding 3. They tie me to the stake in the light of the blood moon, and before my eyes leak out, I see the air in front of me ripple like it does when I know he's there with me, holding my hand. I feel his broad hands lace fast past my hips, calm into my shoulders, pillowcase lips, arch like Cupid, shrunken skin eyes, caverns with the key to the world, my always feral cat prince. Prince of thieves, prince of liars, princess of my dreams, all gone, and then the pressure ups. As my eyeballs pop and I'm tied there in the light of the blood moon with my eyeballs leaking down my face and this sallow grin. A comfort, still. His presence, and it's odd. I can feel him speaking to me even though my eardrums are long gone. Shaken away by the fire, in fact, I don't think there's much left of me now at all. Just a pyre and some ash. A light show for the illegitimates. A rock and roll song for God sent up on my way to heaven. Burn the fucking witch at the stake. Freeze her bones. Scatter them everywhere, and they tie me to that stake in the light of the blood moon, and then the blood moon is in my ears, in my eyes, and he's there with me because I can feel him thinking about me. Thinking about fucking me. About kissing me, moving his cock across my precious opening, teasing, never quite getting me off, making me shake and sigh. Oh, I can feel the blood moon quake as I become something akin to the ash and the skies and a black scorch on the ground where the plants will never grow, because you betcha I'll be back to haunt their ass. Just a pyre and some ash, and the memory of his limbs across mine is a scar that's darker and blacker and deeper than anything I'll ever leave on this earth, and I'm not dying. No. Blood moon, you've got this all wrong. You've got this all backwards. Fuck, you always have this all backwards, you fuck. I'm not dying. I'm transcending. I'm transcending, and we're so linked that if I transcend, then you'll transcend with me. How could I ever think of anything but, of course? How could I ever think of anything but you that I longed for so long before I even knew what longing was? I'm not dying. I'm transcending, even though I don't know what the fuck I'm transcending. I am a ball of light, misplaced energy, adrift on his supernatural highway, and I'm not dying, I'm transcending, and you're coming with me. You can't leave me now, and even if you tried, you'd fail. You've got this all backwards, Blood Moon. It's not me who's haunting you, it's you who's haunting me, and no matter how many times I cast you off, you'll always circle right back round, because I'm not dying, Blood Moon. I'm transcending, and I'm dragging you with me, kicking and screaming, because I am the one you'll come back to in the dead of night when everything else is lost. I'm not dying. It's my body that's dying, and it's love that's winning. And Blood Moon, you don't need me to tell you that love is eternal.
Okay, so
Take him to bed.
For those of you that by the way, I'm Ood with the after show. Ood Gallifrey.
Sage Murray.
Leon Filger.
For those of you who don't know, we got a new voicemail. We actually have a voicemail number that you can call, so feel free to program it into your phones whenever you're feeling like responding to an episode or giving us some of your feedback.
Or telling us to fuck off.
Or correcting us. Or like Nicola did when we called the person that first summited Everest. We called them a person from Australia when they were clearly from New Zealand.
Fuck us, right?
They were a Kiwi the whole time. Yep. Anyway, so the number is 1-884-424-5825 or 1-884-HAIL-VAL.
Fuck yeah, Hail-Val.
Yeah, so
1-884-HAIL-VAL.
So if you type in 1-884-HAIL-VAL, you'll be taken to a menu of options. You can leave a voicemail to us, the hosts. You can leave a prayer to Val, where you can ask her for blessings or curses, or we even have a third extension where you can just shout into the darkness about random shit, and maybe we'll play it on the podcast, maybe not.
I'm pretty sure that I have requested that from one of my favorite people on Twitter, whose name is at Wretched Soul.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure that she just screamed for, Into the Void.
Yeah, so 1-844-HAIL-VAL. So program into your phone, and as a special request, here is the first voicemail we ever received.
Who is it from?
Oh, we're gonna see.
Hello? It's Richard Bigley.
Oh.
Hello? Anyone? Ood? Leon, are you there? Sage? Hello? Anyone? Ugh, this is the worst sex line I've ever called. I can't believe I'm paying $2.99 a minute for this.
And with the first ever official Occultae Veritatis voicemail received, I'm Ood Gallifrey.
Sage Murray, and I love you, Richard Bigley.
Leon Filger, and I love Richard Bigley.
Please call us with better voicemails.
Yeah, that was...
Have a good night.
Good night.
Love you, bye.
Okay.
Did you guys actually listen to